So today I am happy to have a good friend of mine, Latifah, who will be talking to us about her own life experiences. And I'm so glad she's able to join us today because, as I mentioned before, I am trying to speak to various women at different stages in their journey. And she's one of the seasoned women in my life. And I'm glad to have her participate today. And I'd like to thank her for taking the time out to sit and meet with us and chat. So let's hear from Miss Latifah. Lean back, lean in, and let's talk. Good morning.
Well, good morning, my dear.
So first, I'd like for you to introduce yourself. Tell us all about you. I'm glad that you are participating in this conversation that I'm having with different women. And the whole goal is to talk to various women at various stages in their journey. And we're talking about the challenges of motherhood and being married, and to talk about some of the things that we often choose to not talk about or don't like to talk about. And address some of the challenges, because I think when we expose and we talk about things, it creates an avenue for change. And so I'm glad that you are able to participate because you are, a seasoned woman, we'll say. And I know you bring with you a vast of experience, things that you've experienced, personally in your career and all that. So once again, thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm Latifah Akram-Shariff, and I live here in Tampa, Florida. I've been here for about 34 years. I'm an East Coast girl, born in North Carolina, grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, lived about 14 years in Boston. And again, I've been here for 34 years. I have 6 biological children, and I adopted 3 more. The youngest is 24, and the oldest is 55. And I just turned 72 in July. I'm so happy and thankful to the Creator for being here. My background includes work in social services, community services, education. I'm a private clinician, retired. I've worked as secondary education, substance abuse professor at universities, private practices. I've had several businesses of my own over the years. And I was married twice. First time for 8 years, the second time for 27. And I just recently got married after being divorced for about 17 years to a wonderful man who I say is my soulmate in January of this year, 2020. So I'm a newlywed.
All right.
And I'm currently pursuing my doctoral degree. And so I have 17 grandchildren and 7 great-grandchildren.
How many great-grand?
7.
Okay.
7.
Okay.
So, and right now, I saw your topic because, we follow each other on Instant Messenger. I said, okay, here we go. Let me go on and see if I can talk and share my experience. And I never thought that I'd be getting married again, really. I wasn't thinking about that. I had decided that the Creator had decided that, hey, okay, you've had it. This is it. You're happy and, it's okay, and because, I've had a lot of experiences. I've traveled with you to Haiti, Trinidad, Middle East. I'm looking now at going to Belize and doing some stuff over there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, well, we're talking about looking at, I'd like to look at some property over there anyway, several times. So I think this year I'm going to go when the pandemic is over, maybe. But I've always wanted to go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, there's a lot to unpack here that you, so we're going to start. Now, you tell me you have 6 biological and you've raised 3 adopted children. And you tell me that you've had several businesses. And how, yes, you said you're 73. How have you managed to
72,
pack
get it
all
right.
72? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Now, let's try and unpack this. How you been able to accomplish? How have you been able to maintain your sanity? So let's talk about the first marriage. How old were you?
I was 17.
You were 17.
I was,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And
And that was how long did you say that marriage lasted?
7 years.
7 years.
8 years, and then 27. Yeah.
Okay. 8 years. Did you have any children in that marriage?
I had 3 children in that marriage.
Okay.
And,
All right.
being young, nobody teaches you how to choose a mate. Your hormones, my hormones were really active during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
my grandmother at that time, I got pregnant.
Oh, okay.
and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of, you got to get married. So we got married.
Right.
We weren't at all compatible, but we got married. And it lasted for a while, and it was a rocky marriage.
I
And
can imagine. I can imagine being 17 years old, pregnant, and now you're married. And the expectation for you as a woman, now a married woman, whether 17 or not, or not, with you, you are a child at 17, but you have the responsibility of being married and now raising a child. How was that like? You said it was rocky, but did you feel like you were ready for marriage at that point? Did you feel like, okay,
ready for marriage? My first date out, and at that time the word wasn't even prevalent or used. My first date, I was victim of a date rape. You say no, and no, you're penning around, you're playing around, and not knowing that it's gonna go that far. And my first date out, and I say not even penetration, I say I had the virgin child. I got pregnant. And I couldn't believe I didn't even know I was pregnant. People around me did, because old people are were very attentive during that time. And I guess I was sleeping a lot. And they kept asking, and I'm like, no, And so it came out that I happened to be, matter of fact, I was visiting, my parents were not together, and I was living with my father and my stepmom in Connecticut, and I had gone to North Carolina for the summer, and met this young man who's on my birthday, actually my 16th birthday, and we went out on a date. It wasn't even supposed to be dating, it was supposed to be with my cousins, and stuff happens, young people, and ended up in his car, and ended up in a situation where I couldn't get out of, and not knowing how to get out of a situation like that. I never had sex before, wasn't sexually active or anything like that, and ended up getting pregnant. First time out, first date out, first guy out, first time out, and pregnant. So imagine all of that.
Yes. And I've had the experience of talking to many women who have been the victims of either date rape or just sexual assault. And I can remember this young lady where she had a friend of her brother's who came to her house, and she was raped. They weren't dating or anything, and he just took advantage of her. And she never shared that with anybody, not even her brother, who that was his friend. And part of the reason she felt like she couldn't tell or she couldn't share it with anybody, because she felt it was like her fault, because she invited him over. And that's a lot of the shame and guilt that many women experience, that they think it's their fault after they've been victimized. Did any of that happen with you, where you thought, well, I put myself in that situation?
Well, yeah, absolutely. First of all, I didn't know I was pregnant. I really didn't. And I just, as I said, it wasn't what I had envisioned having a sexual experience would be. So I just figured, hey, that happened. There was no penetration. I'm struggling, and all this stuff. This couldn't be. It's just
Right.
couldn't be. And I was in denial throughout the whole pregnancy. I went back to
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut and started having symptoms. I had a boyfriend at that time. I didn't know how to tell. I was in
Right.
denial. I started falling out in school. It was just a whole thing until I was about maybe 7 months pregnant, where my dad just says, "Hey, look, I know you're pregnant. You're not the first one that something like this had happened to." I was just in
Mm-hmm.
denial about the whole thing, really.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right. Right.
thing. It was like that's something that happened to other people. It didn't happen to me. This is something you read about.
Right. Right.
I remember looking in the mirror, crying to myself, and what am I gonna say? Just it was just a terrible, terrible experience, really.
Right. I can imagine. And then, how did you guys end up getting married?
Well, when the baby was born, things were rocky at home because at that time I was a senior in high school. My father was a real, let's say, player, a ladies' man. So I decided to go back to live with my mother and
Okay.
my grandmother in North Carolina. And so then the baby and I went back, cutting through a lot of the drama that went on with that. And
Mm-hmm.
we got married
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then soon got pregnant again and lost that baby because, didn't have nothing about birth control back then with me.
Right. Right.
And after the third, let's see, one, two, then I lost the baby. It was a girl, had two boys. I lost the baby girl that carried it 9 months. So that was another drama. And she was stillborn. And so it was like year after year after year. And then I had my third
Mm-hmm.
son. And then by then we had moved back to New York and the marriage was on the rocks.
Right. Right.
So it was a rocky thing. He had unresolved issues. He was raised by an aunt and uncle, so he didn't feel loved by his
Right.
parents, and he was entitled to everything and couldn't
Mm-hmm.
keep a job. I knew that wasn't for me, even at that age. I knew that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't for me. So I've always worked. I've always tried to learn a skill or stay in school because
Mm-hmm.
my mother was like third generation off the plantation from slavery,
Wow.
and they
Right.
were like live-in maids and would go to New York every year. I was an only child by my mother, and
Mm-hmm.
so I knew I didn't want that. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to be a live-in maid. However, they worked, they saved their money, they bought land. Back then, that was it, having your own land.
Right. Right.
And so my grandmother, my mother, my aunt built houses next to each other
Wow.
and across the street from each other. So it was a sacrifice. But for a young child growing up, it was like I felt my mom loved the little Caucasian children that she was taking care of more than she loved me,
Mm.
you know.
Wow. Wow.
And I
Mm-hmm.
grew up thinking that, it was years until I got into counseling and therapy and all that stuff that I figured out that wasn't the case. That was
Right.
something that I made up, and that they
Mm-hmm.
were trying to go after their freedom, the goals
Right.
they had to leave something, a legacy for the family and all of that. But, when you're young, you don't see that. You just know. I just
Exactly.
know
Exactly.
my mother wasn't there.
Right, right. And it's so amazing that we can look back and see how our perspective in a way have changed from when we're young, how we're seeing things and we're interpreting things and the issues that we had, and how it was something that we created in our head and not the reality. And oftentimes we don't realize that until years later. We think it's
Oh,
our
yeah.
reality, whatever the thoughts are, we see it as the reality. But I'm just thinking how it must have felt being married to the person who victimized you. And I say this because I know so many women are in relationships where they're married, but they're being raped.
The
Oh,
thing was the driving force, and being a clinician and being in the field, the thing was I made a commitment, and that was because I
mm-hmm.
grew up thinking that until I was 14, thinking that my stepdad was my biological dad, and I
Okay.
didn't know that my mom and dad had been married and separated, and that he was I didn't meet him until I was 14. My mom developed a drinking problem. And
Okay.
So early on, and I had to go and live with my stepfather. He came immediately when he heard. He never showed up during that time. I had my stepdad's last name, everything. I never saw my birth certificate until I got ready to go to Connecticut with my dad, when my grandmother says, okay, your mom's lost her mind. I'm calling your dad to come and get you. So imagine that at 14, you know, my grandma is not my grandma, my cousin's not my cousins, and I've got this dad that's my dad. Only thing I've ever seen was a picture in a frame with a guy with a hat on. It never dawned on me. I remember looking, you know how you have collages, but nobody ever talked about who that person was or this person was. And here I have a dad, I have sisters and brothers, and so it was really traumatic. But I made a promise to myself that if I ever got married, I would, number one, tell my children who their fathers were, and I would stay in it regardless of what the situation was. That was I don't know if you've heard of the book, what is it, the 9 or the 6 commitments or something like that, where you make promises as a child. And so I was living into that until finally, I think I discovered that book later on in life, that, hey, you know, commitment. And this
I'm very familiar with
working.
that idea. I haven't read the book.
Yeah, but this is not working. And as a child, I made that commitment, but as an adult, I'm looking at my situation differently, and I don't have to live into that commitment anymore.
Right. Okay. So when you were divorced, you had 3 children.
Yes.
In that first marriage.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, now I'm 23, and I discovered the religion of Islam, and I met my second husband there. A whole new experience, a whole new concept, and we got married. Wonderful, beautiful, but again, you know, we had a very good marriage, and it was based on the religious premise, and we were happy. We fell in and out of love over the years. And then we kind of grew apart because I was on a mission to educate myself. I had this business mind. The women in my family were very business oriented, you know, like.
Right. You mentioned them working and buying land. That's,
and having side businesses and, you know, and all kinds of things. And so that was me. He, on the other hand, I was attracted to him because I think his family was very, very family oriented, very social, very good people, accepted me, accepted my children, accepted us. And I was looking for that and a safe environment for my children. You know, I didn't want them to be in any abusive situation. I didn't want them going through what I went through. And I wanted a good father figure for them. And he was that. And he was a good husband. I was 2 years older than him, and having 3 children, he didn't have any. He never had any other. So he was very, 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 very good man. We were friends. Actually, I took care of him the last 30 days of his life. Okay, he married. When we divorced, he married the week after.
The week after the divorce, he got remarried.
After 27 years. He kind of regretted that.
27 years of marriage.
Yeah, you know. And we tried to work it out, but I was, like I said, I was academically inclined. I was involved in self-help. I was peeling back the onion of my own life. And he was very religious. I was very spiritual. I was very into looking at other aspects of life, other ways of thinking and being, and you know, it didn't jive. My concept of creation and life just changed over time, and I realized I was living into that commitment that I told you about, that if I get married, you know, making sure that I was going to stay in it, you know, and it lasted for a long time. But we grew apart in terms of what we wanted. I was academically inclined. He wasn't. I was into exploring self-help and understanding me. He wasn't. He was really just into the religion. That was it. Not a bad thing. Very good person. But we grew apart. We honestly grew apart.
So who sought for the divorce? The reason I ask that is that I know, according to statistics, majority of the divorce are, initiated by women.
Yeah.
And I'm one.
Yeah, I initiated it. I did. Because we went to counseling, and one of the things that the therapist, the counselor said was, we talked about the thing, and I had a thing because I watched his mother's relationship, and the father made promises, and she was always complaining that he never kept his word. His father and he and my husband's birthday were 2 days apart. They were like twins. Thought patterns, everything. But never kept his word, wasn't motivated to, I wasn't about working for somebody for the rest of my life. That just wasn't me. He was okay. He was a police officer. And you only needed like a high school diploma back then to become a police officer.
Okay.
And not knowing that he'd had an injury during a flogging incident during high school where he was pledging for a fraternity, and they hit him and he went into a coma. So he had a form of retrograde amnesia from that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had to recover from that. Then he was in the military, and he was in a tanker accident, okay? So he had a difficult time in a learning situation. He was smart, but he just couldn't do that.
Right.
And he could remember historical incidents and stuff, but we would argue all the time. And I didn't get until like 20 years into the marriage that he had a receptive delay disorder. So we were arguing because he couldn't visualize what I was saying. He couldn't see what I was saying.
Wow.
I said I wanted to build a counter over here, and I'm very creative, you know me, right? And I want to do this, and he couldn't see it, so there would be an argument, and then it would be about money, and I didn't get that he wasn't seeing what I was saying. He couldn't see the picture. He couldn't visualize it, so we were always arguing. And once I figured that out and working in the field, I was working 24 hours. I'd be working with the public and getting paid for it. Then I come home and I'm still working because there was no understanding there. So that wasn't working, and it wasn't good for him.
So when you said there was no understanding, what do you mean?
Talking to him, unless it was something that he had experienced, he didn't get the message. I soon learned, once I learned about receptive delay disorder, it's like speaking to somebody in another language and they don't understand the words, and you got to say it different ways for them to get what you're saying.
I would imagine that would affect like task, like let's say you ask him to do something, or you expecting him to do something as far as, let's say household chores, and asking or, giving instruction. Does that mean he wouldn't get it? Like he would respond to that? He couldn't understand. Like if you say you needed help,
you wouldn't know it, because he was intelligent, and he could tell you everything that was going on in the world. He was very into the news, what was happening into the Middle East. But the children would do things like, and I always worked 2-3 jobs. He always worked one. With the businesses. I'm thinking he's thinking he, and the job, and he couldn't see, he couldn't get the concept. He was very clean about, keeping stuff going, but the children could sneak somebody in the house, and this has happened, have him hid out, and he wouldn't know. He'd be sitting there, watching TV, thinking everything was fine. I'm concerned about what the children are doing, and, da-da-da-da-da. And he's talking about world affairs, and I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. He had emotional incarceration. I had to, pick him and find out what's going on, with you. And, he couldn't talk about things that were personal unless I was doing a therapy session with him. And that's where the work came in, he just wasn't understanding.
That must have been very challenging. Okay.
And at the time, I didn't know what was going on with him, but once I discovered that, it was easier to deal with, but it was a challenge. It was a real challenge. And then learn about myself.
How did you find out he had this disorder?
Well, being in school and studying, and how was it? So I've always kind of been ahead of myself. I got my master's degree before I got my bachelor's degree.
How'd you do that?
I was a smart child, and I never knew how smart I was, really. Okay, and I'm not that I'm not
Okay.
bragging, or situations open up, and here I was going from a high school diploma into a master's degree program.
Okay. Okay.
And so I got my master's, and I worked in education and, in guidance and assistant principal in Massachusetts. But when I moved south, then when I came into the school system, they're saying, oh, you got to have an undergrad degree, so I went back. At the time, I said, like, well, the hell with this. I'm not,
Oh.
I'm not going to do it. But then I got into substance abuse, and it was easier to get a degree. They would pay for the training for that, but I could also get a bachelor's. So I got my master's in 1 year. I got my bachelor's in 2.5 years in psychology and substance abuse. And it was during that time studying all those concepts and theories and, and at the same time, I was doing landmark education. I did that for about 20 years to peel back my onion and my thinking and the things that I made up. So I was working on me, just working and educating myself, And I had a husband who supported that. So I had to give him his props. He was a stay-home couch potato type person, but he allowed me to do all the things that I wanted to do, and I appreciate and I thank him to this day for that. But I outgrew him.
I'm sure at that time you didn't see it that way. You didn't appreciate it.
I was trying to bring him on. I tried to get him to go back. Ooh, I want to help him with his homework. But then, in a new marriage, it's like there's competition. It was competition. And I didn't want to compete. I just wanted to support. But he didn't see it that way. If he wasn't doing it himself, he would write and, I would edit, and he couldn't take it that I was editing his stuff. Just little things like that. His approach to doing things was so different too.
Well, you mentioned he had his own stuff. I could imagine if he hadn't worked on those things, you doing those things could have seemed threatening to him. Where you seeing it, no, as let's work together. I can help you. But if he's having, his own insecurities, I could definitely see how he could see that more being a threat than a help. Which I think that happens a lot in marriages where there are unresolved issues, there are insecurities, and if you're not able to work on those things, those are the things that can damage and can end a marriage.
Absolutely.
So
I kept saying, I'm not happy. And, I was really aware of what was going on with me. I had spiritual gifts. I would get dreams. I would tell him about him. He would believe me. I could see things that were going to happen before. My family would kind of hate for me to call, because if I had a dream about somebody, usually that person was ready to cross over, or my ancestors would appear to me. So I had spiritual gifts that initially only he knew about, but he couldn't relate to it because he was a concrete thinker. He couldn't see the spiritual aspect. So that we kind of grew apart on that too. I really didn't like the life that I had. And so I found other things to do, and working and always working in the field, working with people, being ambitious, wanting to have my own business and all those things. And I had the energy. He didn't have the energy and drive that I had. I was like ADD on steroids, just normally, and I could do several different things. And I like doing that. And he was kind of supportive, and I would always say, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And we start businesses for him. And then it would end up being my business because he didn't have that drive, that stamina, that go get it like that. He, I'll stay here. I'll watch the kids. He was a good manager in terms of, okay, I'll work all these jobs. We want this. We've got the house. We want to get new furniture. We want to do this. We want to do that. And he would, pay the bills and whatnot until he got to the point where he was spending money that I was giving him, and I could put it back, but he couldn't put it back. And so if I started having to do it again, that was a problem with me. If I had to pay twice, that was a problem. No,
So
and
was that
you gotta
something
figure,
that?
excuse me for cutting you off, that was key, was
Mhm.
that I saw the women in my family doing that. They were the ones that went, the men had jobs and they worked, but back then you made more money then for them being into the homemaking housekeeping type thing. They were live-in maids, and so therefore, even though I said I wasn't going to do that, I ended up doing the same thing, working, being away from my kids, being there with them, but being
Wow.
away at the
Mhm.
same time, and being involved in community work. So it was kind of disguised. I didn't see that I
Wow.
was doing the
Wow.
same thing that
Mhm.
my mother had done. So
Wow. Right. Which made you feel like she loved, the kids more than you because she was taking care of them, spending more time with them. And here you are spending
right.
time not being a housemaid, but working in the community and spending all your time.
Yeah.
Um,
They had the home, they had the
mhm,
in-ground pool, they had the jacuzzi, they had the tree house in the backyard, you know, and they resented that because we were community organizers and the people we worked with didn't have that. Children are mean. I didn't find out until later on that they thought that my children thought that they were better than them, and they only
mhm,
socialized with the kids in the Islamic community. I mean, we didn't have your children probably do the same thing. You're probably not friends with your neighbors or whatever. It was the community thing. And they wanted to
mhm.
be accepted. They wanted to be a part of, whatever was going on in the world. And we were different. We had a different ideology at that time.
Hmm. So I was gonna ask you, was the change in vision or the growing apart, did that happen over time?
It
Say
happened.
that again?
It happened over time. It happened over
Hmm.
time as I grew into understanding of myself and the world around me and how I had become the person that I am or that I was being. And he was still stuck in his traditional role, which was good. He was good. He didn't drink, we weren't into drugs, alcohol, or anything like that. And the religion really kept us together for many years. But then as I grew into knowledge of myself and the spiritual aspect of me, I could not take things altogether literally anymore. Okay, there were other
Hmm.
things that were driving me. There were other forces, the
Right.
seen and the unseen, that he really just couldn't understand. I mean,
Hmm.
so we just grew apart. And I found myself, being in tune with people who were open to things that we didn't understand and trying to seek answers and studying different philosophies and stuff. And he just wasn't into that. So we
So
grew apart.
then, if I'm hearing correctly, I think what you're saying is that not knowing who you are, getting in a relationship, and trying to figure yourself out, could possibly not end too well because in figuring who you are, you may discover that you're not right for each other.
Exactly. And I
Hmm.
discovered that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even in going to counseling, and the therapist, I remember her saying, inevitably, so many people come in and the woman is saying, I'm not happy, I'm not happy. And the man is not hearing it. It's like, why aren't you happy?
Mhm.
We're together, we have this beautiful home, we have the car, we have the dog, we have everything, and you're not happy. But I really wasn't happy because on the emotional level, my needs weren't getting met. The physical, was getting met, but my emotional needs, my spiritual needs as an individual, my soul just wasn't happy. I developed asthma.
Oh, wow.
I developed. What I learned from that was that's feeling like you don't have the right to exist. That mental thought.
Hmm.
Some theories say that you don't have the right to breathe your own air.
Uh, so, right. So then I find it interesting that you were the one who was saying you're not happy. You're the one who initiated the divorce. Then a week later, after you guys are divorced, he's married.
Well,
So was it?
In the Islamic religion, you know, you feel the feeling is, or the thought is, you're not a whole person until you have your other half. And he was a dependent personality, you know. I feel like he grew along with the children. And he was happy. He was content. You know, I wasn't.
Right. And I wonder, is that often the case where you have people in relationships, they're not happy, they're content, they're, even though the relationship has problems, they're not willing to work on them, but the fact that they're in that relationship and it's there, it's established, they're satisfied with it. I remember a lady once I worked with, she was married for many years, and but for the last 10 years as a couple, they weren't even sleeping in the same bedroom. They lived in the same home, but they had their separate lives. And that had been like for 10 years. And eventually she was like, okay, we can't do this. We need to get a divorce. And he was shocked, like, what? So I'm wondering if that's sometimes what happened. People are comfortable in a situation, and being that they're,
well,
that they stay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because back in the day, men were providers and women weren't educated, and they depended on them to take care of them. Well, that wasn't the case. Okay, I had to not only, or I won't say I had to. Well, yeah, I didn't trust, and I guess that comes from my upbringing, that if I didn't work, that if I didn't bring in this extra money, that if I didn't think of how we could do things, that we wouldn't have had what we had, because he wasn't a thinker like that. He wasn't a go-getter, a problem solver like that. I handled all of that kind of things, okay? And I was creative, always coming up with things to do and places to go, plan the vacations, the trips and all that. And we did all of that because that was my contribution to that, to our relationship. And he was a good partner in terms of hanging out and going and socially, and we turned up as the best couple, just that kind of thing. We did things together. He looked good. He didn't have to do the extra, and he was happy,
Right.
But I always wanted somebody to be there to take care of me. This is what I discovered later on. And I never had that. My mom wasn't there. I made her wrong for that. I married a husband. He was there, but he wasn't there. He wasn't trying to take the leadership role and be the one to educate himself. And I saw education as a way of building what you have and who you are so that you can have. I was the one that was doing that, and I got tired. I wanted someone to take care of me, but I didn't feel like I had the liberty to do that without worrying that, we might lose our house or the lights might. I'm not going to trust that he's going to come up with how he's going to pay the light bill, and stuff like that. I had parents that he should have had that he didn't have because I made it easy for him.
So you think eventually it was like, okay, enough, I'm drained.
Yeah, and that I didn't want to do it anymore. And I saw I'm watching his parents. I watched a lot of people that kind of crossed over, and I watched his parents. I watched his mother stay in a situation where she wasn't happy. She always complained about not being happy. And I said, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being in a situation where I'm not happy. And once I accepted I had the right to say, I'm not happy and I don't have to stay in this relationship. I did stay until my baby was 18. By this time,
so that was the point, the tipping point. Okay. That was the tipping point.
Lived into that. I don't want my children to, not know who their dad. We don't have that relationship. I don't want to do that to them.
You still kept that commitment you made to yourself as a child.
And then once I realized it, then I went and adopted the 3 children that I adopted, first 2, and then she had another one, and I adopted the 3rd one. I was doing the same. It was the children that kept us together. And I felt like I wasn't enough for my parents to stay together for me. Okay. So it was that commitment and that driving force that did it until finally I'm like, what are you doing? You're doing it again. I'm not staying been in this marriage 18 more years. It's not working. I could be having an asthma attack and be on the floor. I remember a friend visiting. And I was laying on the floor having a asthma attack, and my friend said, Brother Cypher, don't you see your wife having an asthma attack? Aren't you going to take her to the hospital? He just was not in touch like that. It's like, hey, we pulling this wagon. You better get up and drive it, and let's move it on. What's the matter with you? Okay. It was one of those kind of situations where he just really, wasn't there. And I created that. I created a lot of that.
Right. So when you say you created that,
and I was always thinking we, I covered that. All people saw was, hey, you guys have it. I mean, we moved to Florida. He was a religious leader, and most of the religious leaders back that time, your church took care of them. Well, they never had to take care of me. He was a police officer. I was an educator. They didn't pay our bills. We didn't get a salary, so they didn't own us. We were independent thinkers, and we took care of ourselves. So we didn't fall into that category, and they thought that, we had it made in the shade, and we did when it comes to taking care of and being in leadership roles and doing that. But personally, we were growing apart, and we made a good image in public, a good public image, but people never know what goes on behind closed doors.
Right.
There was no wrong about it.
Did you think you had to do it? Do you think you had to put that image? Because
that didn't even enter into it. I didn't know. I just knew that we weren't happy. We were arguing. Do you remember he's got that receptive delay disorder? I thought it was because we were compatible. He wasn't motivated, and it was like he was unsure about doing things that he hadn't ever done. That retrograde amnesia that he had prevented him to taking on challenges that with me, I'm like, hey, I'll try it. I'm not scared. Like, I liked roller coasters and scary rides and stuff like that. That was not him. Okay. And I would talk him into doing it. He'd be sick and, all this kind of stuff. His nature was just different. He was more sheltered, and he had fears that I didn't have, and, but a good person, but he just, I felt I needed somebody that would work with me to the degree that I was willing to work. And be.
And he couldn't understand that. He couldn't understand what you needed and how to provide and to meet that need.
Yeah. And he didn't want to, he was comfortable. He didn't want to work 2 and 3 jobs. I don't think he ever worked a second job. And my thing was, we're working so that we can get out of this entrapment that we're in, so that we can have our own business and we can work for ourselves. But he was comfortable being in the system. I was never comfortable being.
Okay. So then in that marriage, you had 3 children, right?
By that time, when we divorced, we had 6 children. And we had adopted.
Yeah, the 3 from the previous marriage.
And we had 3 together, 1 deceased, 1 died. My 19-month-old drowned in my backyard.
Wow.
Then the year after that, we adopted my 2 cousins. And then 3 years into that, my cousin had another one. These were my first cousin's daughter's children. And we ended up having those 3, perfect family, to all appearances.
Okay. So then that must mean that after you were divorced, you were now being a single mom, being that you still had your cousin's children.
Well, okay, this is how it went. Whoever had the house had the children. So he had the children.
Oh.
I left, had my own place. And I paid him. And he was happy with that. Okay. And so the moment he said, when the divorce was final, and he said, 1 year into that, when the divorce got final and he said he was getting married, I said, okay, well, fine, but you got to move out the house. First of all, we bought the house together. The children are my biological children, so I don't want to uproot them, so you and your new wife got to go and get your own. And that's what he did. We signed the house over to everything, mutual agreement, so that worked out. And we became best friends. I mean, we would stand for each other. His wife was jealous because she never had children. She didn't have any children. She couldn't have children. She couldn't understand his relationship with his children or his relationship with me because, see, we both came out of blended families where the families got along fine, with the exes and all of this. So that wasn't an issue. There was no sexual stuff going on. We had an understanding if there was something going on with any of these children, even the ones that we adopted, if I had to call you 2:00 in the morning because they're in trouble, I'm going to call you. And then you expected to come. And he did. And he was. That was the relationship that we had.
Okay.
So we remained friends, best friends. We were better friends because I didn't feel responsible for him anymore,
Okay.
I got 3/4 of my brain back. I felt free. I had to think for him to think for me. Oh, man.
Okay. And then you went 17 years by yourself?
Well, he had his wife. I was
But
by
I'm saying
myself.
you were divorced for 17 years before you got remarried again
Yes,
this past
January, to someone that I met
yes.
that we both knew each other from Boston 40, maybe 50 years ago, right? And he was married to a friend of mine, and I was married, and we weren't, our families. I guess he had a good relationship with my husband, Siphoning. He says that, but I don't remember. He and his wife were in the process of getting a divorce back then, so I knew his wife better than I knew him. He was just somebody that I saw, a very handsome young man, and back then it was lawyer gaze, so, I had no kind of attraction, and I was busy, like me to be busy. Imagine me at 23. 24, I'm busy, I'm head of this, I'm getting my master's degree, I've got every committee you could think of, writing, I own business. I think we had a dress shop, I had a counseling service, I was working for the school department, so this has always been me. I know I had ADHD, they didn't have that term back then. Hey, this brother, we're on a conference call with somebody that we knew from Boston because my family, my Islamic family in Boston, we had our children together. We did things together, family things and events. So we're very, very close. So one brother bought an iPhone and he had all these different names from all the different people around the country. So he's got this big 39 people strong conference call going. And, everybody's speaking to each other. Oh, and so here comes my husband, Latifah. And I'm like, yeah. And we started talking. He had a business. And of course, he, like you and your business, I done got all up in the business. And and he had a yacht, and he came to Florida. He lives in Georgia, and he wanted me to see the yacht, and he took me down. I saw the yacht, and I'm on the boat, and we're talking, and we're just gelling and whatnot. So I'm like, I'm seeing this attraction, and I'm like, well, brother, I do a psychosocial assessment on anybody that I even think about talking to, So we had this 3 months where no, we ain't gonna do nothing like that, let me just find out who your mama is, who your dad, where you from, what was your relationship like, that. Girl, after 3 months, we got married, so.
So what do you think did it? What do you think made you say, okay, let me give marriage another try?
It was the chemistry, girl. I ain't had this kind of chemistry, I don't think, for any of the people I was married to in my life ever. Really, I mean, we like the same songs. I could start saying something, he'll finish it, and vice versa. Conversation comes up. He's educated. He's a businessman. He could afford to take care of me. And all the things that I always wanted, he has it, So, I had to think about that because, I'm a very independent person. You've never heard me talk about anybody that I was really romantically interested in. It's always been my work, and I
Yeah.
think that that's what I did. I was working on me and trying to find me. And
Okay.
I had just shut down on that part of it, that part of life. I had the husbands, I'd had the houses, the property, the education, all of that, all of those things, leadership positions that people strive for in their early days. And here I am at 72. The sex is good. I'm like,
Now but the thing is, you mentioned he's in Georgia, you're in Florida. How are you managing?
well, and that was something we had to work out because traditionally, God is good, really, because you look at it, what I always wanted was the traditional where I have the husband that he's there and well, it hasn't worked that way because he has a lot of business connections, with people all over the world and in other countries. And he's established with the community, Islamic community in Georgia. I love Florida. He loves Florida too, but he has connections there. And so we travel back and forth. He comes here, I go there. It's like a honeymoon every time.
Well, they do say
As an
absence
old
makes the
lady,
heart
old
grow
women don't
fonder.
talk about these kind of things, because I'm
Uh-huh.
just being real, I hope you're gonna
Be
edit.
real. I like
I'm
that.
gonna edit this, because I thought, when you get to a certain age, your organs don't work, and that you don't have feelings. And girl, please,
Okay.
don't you believe it? If it ain't working, he ain't the one. Okay.
All right, let's see.
So it's been a mind blowing. I just think, my God, I'm like, oh my gosh. And, new marriages, and I'm fighting to, when are you moving here? And, am I moving there? And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at the opportunity,
Yeah.
that I don't have to be all up on him. Because I was like you were saying, like the woman told you that she had moved her husband to another room. I had done that with my previous husband. He was on the other side of the house because he snored so bad. Would not go in
Yeah.
medication. He would not check in with
Yeah.
him. I bet you when he got that new wife, he had to do all of that. And she put him in his own room too. So
But your story is beautiful. The fact that you said even at 72 you can find love. So sometimes we give up on love thinking, okay, it's not gonna happen for me, or it didn't work out, in my previous marriages, and it's not for me. You've given some people hope that no, it's not too late. You can find love no
no.
matter the age.
And I
That's
wasn't
beautiful.
just searching for a piece of meat. Okay.
Hmm.
I got to have a man. It wasn't that, because I have
Right.
sisters, I have brothers, especially in my community, like you and your husband, and,
Hmm.
Lumen and the people. Everywhere I go, I have brothers. And most of my relationships are with men, my brothers and my sisters. We talk, we kick it, we have a good time. And that meant a
Right.
lot to me. I didn't have a husband that I could really do that with on an
Hmm.
ongoing basis, And I have a husband that I can do that with. And I can have a relationship at many different levels. We can communicate, we can talk about things of interest, we can do business together. We have an intimate relationship where we're compatible, and we laugh, we sing, it's just a blessing.
Hmm.
And I can
So
be by
I'd like,
myself and be okay too.
yes, yes, yes. And I think that's what you've said. It's like in discovering who you are, figuring out who you are, and accepting who you are, loving yourself,
Yeah.
then it's easier to not find love, but it's being comfortable who you are. You're not looking for somebody to make you happy because you know who you are and you can make yourself happy. But when you have companionship, people who appreciate, someone who appreciates and loves you, and you guys are, you want to do life together and you're on the same page, that makes it beautiful. It's not where one is trying to get the other to make them happy and to fulfill their needs because you've done that yourself.
And we're both
Sometimes that's what happens in relationships. You're trying to find somebody to make you happy when you need to make yourself happy.
Happy. Nobody can make me anything.
Right.
And that's it. And I'm always stressing because he's sacrificial. And I can be to a certain extent as well. But I always press understanding the stage that you're in. For us at this age is self-actualization and that first law of nature, right? Which is taking care of self, taking care of my personal needs, being responsible for me. Whereas our inclination, both of us, he's still a real community person. He's got to do this for the community. Brother, I done paid my dues. I done this community, that community, the world mission, and all of that. I'm here for you. I'm here for me, and I'm here to make sure that you don't overdo it to a certain extent that you don't have anything. You're not taking care of you. You can't take care of me because you're giving everything to the world.
Right.
And so I'm like his back for that. And he lets me know he appreciates that. Now, some of it is selfish because, I just want to be with him. Oh, girl.
All right. Well, we have to wrap it up. And it's been wonderful, but we got to end. Every good thing must come to an end. So now tell us, what would you say to a young couple or somebody just young, just trying to figure life out, figure love out, figure marriage out, figure family out? What would you say to them?
Well, at this point in my life, I have this theory about life lessons that each of us are incarnated here to learn something. And the people that are in our lives, whether it's for a minute or 20, 30 years, there are lessons that and this is my perspective, that we came here or we agreed to unite on while we're here. And until we learn that lesson, we're going to be in that relationship, whatever it is, whether it's a friend, whether it's a marital relationship, your parents, everything. That we selected them. I used to tell my children, when they used to say, well, I didn't ask to come here, I said, oh, yes, you did. And you agreed that I would be the mother and you would be the father and that I had something to contribute to you. Okay, and so that's how it is. We've forgotten what that is. But in terms of relationships, I suggest the journey doesn't start until you marry. It doesn't start. Then the first year, you're going through what it is you can deal with and what you can't. Then it's a learning experience. Then the first 5 years, you're going to experience just about anything that you're going to experience. And when you go beyond that, there are other lessons, Sometimes you don't make it. It's just like in a new business. Most businesses fail because the preparation, the planning hasn't been done. You haven't thought it through. Nobody taught us how to choose a mate. But now that I look at it, I'm like, okay, I chose that mate because I had agreed to choose that mate. I'm going on a spiritual level now, okay? Before I even came here. And that this person is in my life because there's a lesson to be learned there. Now, I don't know if it's going to last a year, if it's going to last 10 years, but I will know when it's over, when it's time to move on, So
it's that life has lessons for us to learn.
Yeah.
And until we learn those lessons,
you're going to repeat
we can't move. We can't move. We can't graduate.
We can't graduate.
I think sometimes even in different relationships, there are lessons to be learned, and you might change relationship. If you haven't learned that lesson, you will see that you experience the same.
You're going to repeat it again with somebody else. And and even in this relationship, just starting out, it was so rocky. There was some things I'm like, oh man, I ain't putting up with this. But at every point that I got to that position, it seemed like God would say, no, it ain't time yet. And you can't leave this relationship because, we getting ready to do the fasting. It's Ramadan. You can't leave it now because it's this that's going on. You can't do it now. And that was God saying, no, it ain't time for you to leave. What are you going to do? You just consider, you've been doing you all these years. Why are you running? So it's just going to come back. Might as well stay in it and work it out. You'll know when it's done.
Yeah, we got to learn our lessons. We can run from our lessons oftentimes because it's so uncomfortable
Oh,
and
yeah, you just
difficult. We
want it to
want
be
to
over.
run.
Want
Yeah,
it
we
to be
want
over.
it to be over. We want to press the fast forward button and be like, next. But we have to go through the trials and the challenges so that we can learn and grow. And I think that's how our characters, our characters build through the trials that we experience and through the lessons that we learn. So thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you so much, Latifah, for talking and sharing your life experiences and for being real and honest. I love that. And I wish you the best with
Thank you.
your new husband.